Um, I want to start today's deep dive with a bit of a confession.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I have this corner of my backyard that I am genuinely terrified of.
Terrified, like structurally terrified or
No, it's not because of like spiders or a broken fence or a sinkhole or anything. It is because about 4 years ago, I made a massive Ricky mistake.
Mhm.
I planted lemon balm directly into the ground.
Ah, the classic blunder.
Right. And now it just owns the yard.
Yeah,
It owns
yeah.
the flower beds. Honestly, I think it's trying to get the deed to the house at this point.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And if you talk to anyone who gardens, whether they are, a master horticulturist or just someone who bought a basil plant at a grocery store once,
Yeah.
they will tell you this is basically the first commandment of gardening.
Thou shalt not plant mint or anything in the mint family directly in the earth. It is the golden rule.
Exactly. It's the gremlin of the plant world. You assume it's this delicate, nice-smelling little herb, but you turn your back and it becomes this invasive monster that just consumes everything in its path.
It really does have that reputation.
That is the story we are all told.
Right.
That is the internet wisdom.
It is absolutely the prevailing narrative. You look anywhere online and it says, mint is invasive. Mint is unstoppable. Keep it in a pot or it will ruin your life.
But today, we are going to challenge that exact narrative.
Right.
We're looking at a source that basically says, actually, that's a bug in your code, not a feature of the plant.
It's a really fascinating perspective shift.
It totally is. We are diving into a blog post from a site called qianmeng.org. And the post is titled, Notes on Gardening, Part 821, Why Your Mint is Not Invasive in the Wild. And I think before we even get to the mint itself, we really have to talk about that title.
Part 821.
Yes, Part 821.
It immediately signals that we aren't dealing with just some casual weekend hobbyist here.
No, definitely not.
This isn't an Instagram influencer posting a filtered picture of a perfect harvest. This is someone logging serious data over time.
Exactly. The author is Qianmeng. And looking at his profile, and honestly the sheer volume of his output, he describes himself as an old software plumber.
I love that phrase.
Right. And that description just feels so incredibly accurate when you look at how he writes and how he formats this blog.
A software plumber, that's someone who deals with the messy underlying infrastructure of systems. They fix the pipes, they debug the code, they constantly worry about efficiency and resource allocation.
Yeah, back-end stuff.
Precisely. And if you look at the sidebar of his blog, you see this wonderfully eclectic mix that perfectly illustrates that exact mindset.
It is a wild list. I was scrolling through it before we started. You have notes on Haskell programming, which is this very mathematical, complex, functional coding language.
Right.
Then you have benchmarking Wi-Fi 7, then notes on AI, and then sitting right next to all that high-tech, deeply technical stuff, you have notes on fish keeping and notes on gardening.
Which is brilliant because most people would see those as completely separate worlds. They'd say, I code during the day and I garden on the weekend to escape the code.
Yeah, a total mental break.
But for Eng, they are all just systems. A fish tank is a system with very specific variables: nitrates, ammonia, temperature.
Right.
A Wi-Fi network is a system with bandwidth and latency. And a garden is just another complex system with its own specific inputs and outputs.
And that is exactly what makes this deep dive so cool for you listening today.
Yep.
We are basically going to watch a software engineer debug nature.
Yes.
He looks at the common documentation, which literally says, warning, mint is a monster. And he decides to run the code in production to see if it's actually true.
And what he finds, which is the crux of our whole discussion today, is that the documentation is incomplete.
Incomplete, yeah. So let's get into his bug report. Eng starts by pointing out that most people are just parroting facts.
That's his exact word, parroting.
Yeah. He writes, I've learned to take those online warnings with a pinch of salt. Most people simply parrot facts they found on the internet without any actual verification or hands-on testing.
This is such a huge problem in the information age, isn't it? We get this massive echo chamber effect.
Oh, completely.
One person writes a warning based on their very specific experience, probably in a mild, temperate climate with perfect, fluffy potting soil. And it gets repeated across thousands of blogs until it becomes a universal law. Mint is invasive, period. No asterisks.
But Eng is an empiricist. He doesn't really care what the forum says. He cares what happens in his actual backyard.
Mm-hmm.
So what is his hypothesis here? Why isn't his mint taking over the world like the internet promised?
His hypothesis is essentially about resource constraints. He argues that mint is only invasive under ideal conditions.
Which, when you say it out loud, makes total sense.
Hmm.
I mean, even a virus needs a host. Even a fire needs oxygen.
Precisely. For mint to behave like the monster we all fear, it requires a very specific environment. It needs loose, loamy soil. It needs regular, abundant watering. And it needs plenty of fertilizer.
Right.
If you provide those optimal inputs, the system output is massive, unstoppable growth.
But Ang's garden is absolutely not a luxury resort for plants.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the first variable he changes in his testing environment, the soil.
This is probably the biggest physical factor. He describes his ground as hard, compacted clay.
Now, I have tried to dig in clay before. It is back-breaking work. It's heavy, it's sticky when wet, and it's basically like concrete when it's dry.
And that is exactly why his mint struggles. We have to understand how mint actually spreads. It uses rhizomes.
Those are the underground runners, right?
Exactly. These underground runners shoot out horizontally from the main plant to establish new territory. In loose potting soil, those runners encounter almost zero physical resistance. They can just sprint through the dirt.
But in clay.
In compacted clay, every single millimeter of growth is a battle. The plant has a finite energy budget. It gains energy from the sun, and it has to spend that energy to grow its roots.
Oh, I really like that framing. It's an economy.
It is exactly an economy. If the physical cost of pushing a root through the soil is low like it is in fluffy potting mix, the return on investment is incredibly high. The plant spends a tiny bit of energy and gets a lot of new territory.
Makes sense.
But in Ang's clay, the cost of movement is astronomically high. The plant is spending all its available energy just trying to wedge itself through this dense, unforgiving material.
So it's not that the mint chooses not to be invasive. It's that it's essentially broke. It has no energy left in the budget for massive expansion because it spent everything it had just surviving the soil.
That is a great way to put it. It's physically constrained. Ang notes that the rhizomes have to physically fight through the earth. The clay effectively walls the plant in.
It's like trying to run a sprint while waist-deep in mud. You might naturally be the fastest runner in the world, but the environment is going to severely slow you down.
Exactly. And that brings us perfectly to the second variable.
Yeah.
Because even if the mint manages to push through that dense clay, it runs into another major problem. It's not alone out there in the garden.
Right. He mentions wild grass.
This is the competition factor. Think about a typical manicured garden. What do we do before we plant? We weed. We clear the space. We create a biological vacuum.
We make a nice clean bed for it.
Right. And nature absolutely hates a vacuum. So if you put mint in a clear, empty bed with loose soil, of course it takes over. You've just removed all its rivals.
But Ang isn't babying his garden. He has established wild grass everywhere. And wild grass is, well, it's nasty stuff. It's tough.
It is the incumbent operating system, if you want to stick to the software analogy. It has been there much longer, its root systems are deeper, and it is significantly more efficient at extracting limited resources from that terrible clay soil than the mint is.
So the mint is the new kid on the block trying to muscle in.
Exactly. It's trying to enter a biological system that is already operating at 100% capacity. The wild grass is already drinking the water and eating whatever nutrients are available.
Yeah.
Ang points out that this constant competition definitely stunts the mint's growth. The mint is fighting a brutal war on two fronts: the physical resistance of the clay and the resource war with the established grass.
I just love this because it completely flips the bully narrative we all know. We usually think of mint as this aggressive bully that pushes other delicate plants around. But in Ang's garden, mint is actually the underdog. It's getting bullied by the grass and blocked by the clay.
It really highlights how much of what we call invasiveness is actually just unearned opportunity.
That's a great point. But there's a third variable here that I found really interesting, and honestly, it's one that kind of surprised me. The climate.
Yes. This is where the software plumber mindset really pays attention to the environmental stacks of the system.
So Ang is located in a tropical climate. He specifically mentions tropical weather and seasonal heat waves. Now, generally when I think of the tropics, I think of a giant greenhouse.
Sure.
Heat plus humidity usually equals an absolute explosion of plant growth. So my first instinct would be to assume mint would just go totally crazy in that kind of heat.
You would naturally think so, but this is a nuance that so many people miss. There is a very distinct difference between warmth and stress.
Okay, break that down for me. How does that affect the mint?
Well, Ang notes that mint is an incredibly thirsty plant. It has a very high water requirement to maintain those lush green leaves. In a tropical heat wave, even if there is some ambient humidity, the evaporation rate is incredibly intense. The sun is just baking the soil, that hard clay we talked about, and it's baking the leaves of the plant.
So the plant is effectively losing water faster than its roots can drink it from the hard clay.
Correct. And when a plant faces that severe level of moisture stress, it doesn't try to grow, it shuts down.
Mm.
Ang observes that during these seasonal heat waves, his mint actually enters a dormant survival mode.
Dormant survival mode. It just stops growing.
It produces only a few tiny shoots. It effectively throttles its own CPU to prevent overheating, to go back to the tech analogy. It realizes if I try to grow big, broad leaves right now, I will dehydrate and I will die. So it stays small, just hunkers down to survive.
That is absolutely fascinating. So the dreaded monster of the garden is actually hiding from the sun.
It hides until the environmental conditions change. And Ang, being the observant, meticulous logger of data that he is, notices exactly when the switch finally flips.
The rainy season.
He writes, quote, "Once the roots are well established, it'll suddenly take off, particularly when the rainy season hits."
So it's opportunistic.
That is the perfect word for it. It's not a constant, unstoppable force of destruction. It is an opportunist just waiting for a system update.
Yeah.
When the rainy season patch is installed, suddenly the resources are available again. The massive water requirement is met, the clay softens up slightly, and boom, the code executes and it grows.
This makes me think about that software plumber tag again. Because if you look at this whole big picture, the clay, the wild grass, the scorching heat, the monsoon rain, he isn't looking at a plant that has an evil personality. He's looking at a neutral system with shifting inputs.
Exactly. Input, water, output, growth, input, compacted clay, output, stunted roots. He has completely demystified the evil nature of the plant and reduced it down to a basic set of operating conditions.
It reminds me, I was looking at his footer again at those blog archives. We mentioned he's on part 821 of just his gardening notes. I did a quick count while reading. In just the first 2 months of 2026, he posted something like 177 times.
That is astonishingly prolific.
It's insane discipline. And the topics just bounce around from notes on Rust programming to notes on dieting to notes on Obsidian software. It really speaks to a mind that is just constantly monitoring, tweaking, and documenting every aspect of his world.
It's the hacker mindset, in the pure original sense of the word. Not breaking into bank servers, but deeply understanding how complex things work by poking at them.
Yeah, pulling it apart to see how it ticks.
Exactly. He's hacking his garden. He's not blindly accepting the user manual that says, warning, do not plant in ground.
Yeah.
He's figuring out the root access for himself.
Root access. Nice pun.
I try.
And the funny thing is, despite all this, despite the struggle with the clay, the aggressive grass, the dormancy during heat waves, he does actually still grow it. He didn't rip it out of his yard.
No, he didn't. He specifically propagates peppermint.
Because of the smell, right. He mentions he loves that cool menthol scent it gives off.
And this is the ultimate payoff for deeply understanding a system. Because he knows the variables, he knows the clay will physically hold it back, he knows the heat will naturally throttle it, he can safely enjoy the plant without fear.
But he still has a protocol. It's not like he just throws seeds everywhere and hopes for the best.
Right. He mentions he keeps propagation to a very smaller, more manageable scale. He propagates new plants one by one whenever a new branch sprouts from the tip.
That phrase, one by one, really stuck out to me when reading the source. It's so precise. It's not, hey, I grabbed a huge bunch of cuttings and shoved them in the dirt. It's a very deliberate, controlled replication process.
It's version control for plants. He is deploying the code one instance at a time. He sees a healthy branch, he makes a calculated decision to propagate it, and he manages that specific unit. He is never letting the system scale beyond his personal ability to manage it.
So he has basically created a sandbox environment where he can run this incredibly dangerous virus, the mint, safely, just because he fully understands the hardware limitations of his garden.
That is a brilliant analogy. Think about it. If you run a massive memory hogging program on a state-of-the-art supercomputer, it might try to take over the whole system. That's planting mint in premium potting soil.
Right.
But if you run that exact same program on an old, dusty rig with limited RAM and a very strict operating system, that's Ang's clay garden, the program runs, sure, but it physically cannot take over.
It really makes you wonder how many other absolute truths out there in gardening, or honestly just in life, are just unsolved variables that we haven't tested.
Oh, absolutely. I think the parroting problem that Ang brought up applies to almost everything we do.
How so? Like outside of gardening.
Well, think about how many times you, or anyone listening, have been warned away from trying something new because of internet wisdom. Don't try to learn C++ Bane, it's way too hard. Don't try to bake sourdough bread, it's a total nightmare to maintain the starter. Don't start a business, it's too much work.
Don't buy a fixer-upper house, it will ruin your marriage. We hear these sweeping statements, and we just treat them as unchangeable laws of physics.
But those warnings are almost always generated by people operating under very specific conditions. Maybe the person who said C++ is too hard just didn't have a good teacher or tried to learn it all in one weekend. Maybe the sourdough person was trying to bake in a freezing cold kitchen with terrible yeast.
So we end up parroting warnings that might not actually apply to our specific soil, to stick with the metaphor.
Exactly. We need to be a lot more like Aang. We need to check our own variables before we panic. Maybe you have slay soil in your life. Maybe you have a specific constraint or a specific advantage that changes the expected outcome entirely.
If you change the input, you inherently change the output.
It really is that simple. And paradoxically, that complex.
I want to leave everyone listening with a thought here. Something that has been bouncing around in my head since we first started talking about this concept of ideal condition.
Okay, let's unpack it.
We've spent this whole deep dive talking about how to stop a monster. We're basically saying mint is only a monster because we pamper it. We give it loose soil, we give it constant water, we meticulously remove all the competition, and then we act completely shocked when it aggressively takes over.
We actively create the monster by removing all the natural friction.
Right. So I want you to flip that around. Look at your own life. Look at your workplace. Look at your daily routines and habits.
Where are you going with this?
What monsters are you currently dealing with right now that are only monsters because you are accidentally pampering them?
Oh, wow. That is a very provocative question.
Think about it. Is there a toxic dynamic at work? Is there a recurring anxiety you have? Is there a bad habit that just feels incredibly invasive and totally unstoppable?
And you feel like it's just taking over your backyard.
Exactly. But you have to ask yourself, are you giving it loose soil? Are you watering it every single day with your attention and your energy? Have you intentionally removed all the wild grass competition that might actually keep that bad habit in check?
That is profound. We so often try to solve our problems by fighting them directly. We try digging them up by the roots. But maybe the actual solution is just to stop tilling the soil.
Stop making it so exceptionally easy for the problem to grow. Let the ground get a little hard, introduce some healthy competition for your time, put that problem in a tropical heat wave where it has to seriously fight for your mental resources.
Treat it like a pure resource management issue. Throttle the CPU. See if the terrifying monster turns back into just a small, struggling little plant that you can easily manage.
It works for Mint. It works for a complex software system. It might just work for us, too.
I think Aang would definitely agree with that. Debug the system. Don't just blindly blame the code.
Huge thanks to the old software plumber, Kian Meng, for his 821st note on gardening. It's a phenomenal reminder that sometimes the most dangerous things in the world are only dangerous because we inadvertently let them be.
Indeed. Always verify your inputs.
Thanks for diving in with us today. We'll see you on the next one.
Goodbye.